A week after my wife's funeral, I sat in a lawyer's office as her estate was divided. My son inherited the house. My daughter-in-law received every investment account. Then the lawyer handed me a single envelope. She smirked. 45 years of hard work, and all you got was a letter. Leave the real money to us. My son stayed silent. My heart sank until I unfolded the note and read the first 3 lines left by my wife. Thanks for being here. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, your city or country. Welcome to Dad Returns. I read every comment. One quick note. This story includes fictional elements for storytelling. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental, but its message is worth hearing. I wore my black suit for only the 3rd time in my life that morning. The first time was Michael's wedding, 7 years ago. Eleanor had dragged me to 3 different department stores before she found the right one, a slim-cut charcoal jacket that she said made me look like a man who built something worth celebrating. I had laughed and told her I was just a retired electrician. She had straightened my tie and said that was exactly the point. The second time was her funeral 10 days ago, and now this. The elevator ride up to the 12th floor of the Meridian Tower felt longer than it should have. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel doors, a 67-year-old man with calloused hands and a suit that still carried the faintest trace of lavender. Eleanor's perfume pressed into the fabric from the last time she had hugged me before the hospital took her away for good. Attorney Gerald Hawkins had a corner office that smelled like leather and old coffee. He was a thin man in his late 50s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of voice that made everything sound like a verdict. 3 rows of framed certificates lined the wall behind his desk. I counted them while I waited for everyone to settle in, because looking at anything else in that room meant looking at Diana. She was already seated when I arrived back, straight hands folded on the glass table like she was chairing a board meeting. Her black dress was tailored and pressed, not a wrinkle in sight, the kind of morning outfit you buy in advance. Michael sat beside her, his eyes red-rimmed and distant, a box of tissues in front of him that he hadn't touched. "Dad?" Michael stood when I walked in, and for a moment I thought he might hug me. Instead, he touched my shoulder once quickly and sat back down. "Good to see you, son," I said, and meant it more than he probably knew. Diana did not look up. I took the seat directly across from them, the one that faced the window. Outside, Charlotte was putting on its October best, the skyline sharp and golden in the morning light. Eleanor had always said fall in this city was God showing off. I gripped the edge of the table to keep my hands steady. "Shall we begin?" Hawkins asked, adjusting his glasses. He didn't wait for an answer. He read in that flat, professional tone that strips all emotion from the most important words a person ever writes. The legal name, the date, the city of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. I straightened in my chair and thought about Eleanor, about the way she hummed while she made coffee, about the sound of her pen moving across paper late at night when she thought I was asleep. "To my beloved son, Michael James Callahan," Hawkins began, "I bequeath the family residence located at 4412 Ballantine Manor Drive, Charlotte, valued at $1.8 million, along with all furnishings and personal property contained therein." Michael flinched like he'd been hit. A single tear ran down his cheek and he pressed his knuckles to his mouth. I kept my eyes on the window. "To Diana Callahan, beloved daughter-in-law," Hawkins continued, "I bequeath the entirety of my current investment portfolio, including all brokerage accounts, mutual funds, and associated assets valued at approximately $2.1 million. Diana's chin lifted slightly. Just slightly. The corner of her mouth moved in a way that wasn't quite a smile but was close enough to one that my jaw tightened. "To the Grandchildren's Education Trust, established in the names of Lily and Connor Callahan, I leave $400,000 to be administered according to the terms of the trust agreement on file with this office." I nodded slowly. That was Eleanor, always thinking ahead, always making sure the children were taken care of. I felt a small, painful wave of pride. Then Hawkins turned to the final page. He paused. Just half a second, but I caught it. "And to my husband, Robert James Callahan," he said, "I leave a personal letter." The room went quiet in a way that felt deliberate. No dollar amount. No asset. No property. After 45 years of marriage, after every paycheck I had handed over on Friday evenings, after every overtime shift, and every missed vacation, and every Saturday I had spent under someone else's sink or up on someone else's roof, Eleanor had left me a letter. My stomach did not drop. That would come later. What I felt in that moment was something stranger, a hollow floating sensation, like the floor had gone soft beneath my feet, and I was waiting to see whether it would hold. Hawkins slid the envelope across the table. It was plain white, unsealed on one end. My name was written across the front in Eleanor's handwriting, that careful, slightly right-leaning cursive she had developed during years of writing on blackboards. I had seen that handwriting on birthday cards, grocery lists, and love notes tucked into my lunchbox for 4.5 decades. My hand was steady when I reached for it. I don't know how. I held the envelope and stared at my name written in her hand, and for a moment the entire room disappeared. It was just me and those 7 letters, ROBERT, written by fingers I would never hold again. "Well," said Diana. "Well," Diana said again, louder this time, and the word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. She rose from her chair with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who had been waiting a long time to stand up. Her eyes moved from Hawkins to Michael, and finally settled on me with an expression I had never seen directed at another human being outside of a courtroom drama flat, certain and utterly without apology. "I think that settles things pretty clearly, doesn't it?" she said. Eleanor was a smart woman. She knew exactly what she was doing. I kept my eyes on the envelope. She knew who was capable of managing real assets. Diana's voice dropped half a register, not quieter, just more precise. And she knew who wasn't. Hawkins cleared his throat. "Mrs. Callahan, perhaps we should allow Mr. Callahan some privacy too. He's fine." She cut him off without looking at him. Then she turned back to me and her voice shifted again, slower now, each word placed like a tool being set down on a workbench. "You know what you are, Bob. You're a retired electrician. You spent 45 years climbing ladders and pulling wire for other people's houses. That's honorable. It really is." She paused. "But it doesn't qualify you to manage a $2 million portfolio." Eleanor understood that. She protected this family the only way she could. My chest felt like something had reached inside it and was slowly tightening its grip. "So here's what's going to happen." Diana continued, smoothing the front of her dress with both palms. "You're going to take your letter and you're going to start making arrangements. Michael and I will be moving into the Ballantyne house within the week. I'd appreciate it if you could have your personal belongings cleared out by Sunday. I'll have the locks changed Monday morning." The room held its breath. I looked at Michael. He was staring at the table. Not at his hands, not at me, not at Diana. At the table itself, at some fixed, neutral point that required nothing of him. His jaw was set. He knew what was coming, and he had chosen in advance not to meet my eyes when it arrived. That was the moment that hurt more than anything Diana had said. Not the words, not the dismissal, not being told to pack up 45 years of a life by Sunday. It was my son looking at the table. "Michael." My voice came out quieter than I intended. He didn't look up. "Michael," I said again. His throat moved. He swallowed. And then he looked at me, and what I saw in his face was not cruelty. It was shame. Deep, corrosive shame that told me everything I needed to know about the last 12 years of his marriage. Diana was still talking. Something about estate tax timelines and property transfer documentation, and whether I had a storage unit already arranged. Her voice had taken on the tone of someone reading from a checklist. Hawkins was making notes. The pen scratched against the legal pad in small, precise movements. I stood up, not dramatically, not slowly for effect. I just stood up the way I had stood up from 1,000 job sites over 45 years, because the work was done and it was time to go. Diana's voice stopped. "I'll be out by Sunday," I said. I picked up the envelope from the table, folded it once along its width, and slid it into the inside breast pocket of my suit jacket, pressing it flat against my chest with one hand. Eleanor's handwriting against my ribs. I buttoned the jacket. "Gerald," I said, nodding once to Hawkins, "I appreciate your time." Then I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the hallway without looking back. The carpet in the hallway was dark burgundy. The overhead lights were the color of old brass. Somewhere down the corridor, a phone rang twice and stopped. I walked to the end of the hall and stood at the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over Tryon Street, 12 stories below. The city moved the way it always moved without knowing or caring what had just happened in room 1204. My left hand found the edge of the window frame and pressed against it hard enough to feel the cold seeping through the glass into my palm. The hand of a man who had rewired 200 homes and never once lost his nerve on a live circuit. Eleanor's letter sat against my chest and did not move. I thought about what Diana had said. Every word of it. Not because it had broken something in me, but because something about the precision of it, the preparation of it, the way it had come out, fully formed and rehearsed, told me this was not the first time Diana had said those words. She had said them before. Maybe not out loud. Maybe just to herself in the quiet of a room I was never in. And Eleanor had known. I was certain of it, the way you become certain of things you cannot prove. Eleanor had known, and she had still left me nothing but a letter. I pulled the envelope from my pocket and looked at my name again in her handwriting. My thumb moved along the sealed flap. Not to open it, just to feel it. She had sealed it herself. She had pressed down every corner. She had put it in this envelope, addressed it to me specifically, and arranged for Gerald Hawkins to place it in my hands on this exact morning. Eleanor had never done anything without a reason. I put the envelope back against my chest, turned from the window, and walked toward the elevator. The button glowed amber when I pressed it. I watched the number above the doors count down from 12. Whatever was in that letter, she had written it for me, and Eleanor Callahan had never once in 45 years let me down. The parking garage beneath Meridian Tower smelled like exhaust fumes and concrete dust. My truck was on level B2, backed into a corner spot, the way I always parked, force of habit from 30 years of hauling equipment in and out of tight job sites. I sat behind the wheel with the engine off and the envelope on my knee and did not move for a very long time. Outside the windshield, a yellow fluorescent tube flickered every few seconds. In 45 years of electrical work, I would have fixed that in under 10 minutes. Right now, I could not make myself care. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with my heart, and everything to do with it. I had held myself together up there. Through every word Hawkins read, through every calculated syllable Diana delivered, through Michael's eyes fixed on the table like the wood grain held the answers to questions he was too afraid to ask. I had held it all the way down the elevator, all the way across the lobby, all the way to B2. But now, alone in the gray half-light with Eleanor's handwriting on my knee, something in my throat began to give way. 45 years, I said out loud. My voice cracked on the second word. The garage did not answer. The fluorescent light flickered. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth and breathed through my nose until the tightness passed. Eleanor used to say I was the only man she knew who could cry without making a sound. She said it like it was a compliment. I was never sure. I looked down at the envelope. 7 letters. My name. Her hand. I had been carrying this thing against my chest for 40 minutes, and I still hadn't opened it. Part of me was afraid of what it might say. Part of me was afraid it would say exactly what Diana had implied. A polite goodbye, a gracious thank you, a few warm sentences that amounted to nothing more than a receipt for 45 years of marriage. But Eleanor had never once been polite when she meant something important. When she had something real to say, she was direct. She was always direct. My thumb slid under the flap. The fold was clean. She had sealed it carefully, pressed down every corner the way she pressed everything, with intention, with permanence. I eased it open without tearing and pulled out a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. I unfolded it. One page. Her small, even handwriting. 3 lines. 3 lines. I read them once. Then I read them again. My hands started shaking so hard the paper rustled. Don't argue with anyone about the will. Don't sign anything they give you. And don't let anyone know about safety deposit box 908 at First Heritage Bank. I set the paper flat on my thigh and pressed my palm over it to stop the trembling. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to get out. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips and my temples behind my eyes. She knew. Eleanor had known this was coming. She had sat down, chosen her words with the same precision she brought to everything, and written me a 3-line map out of the wreckage before the wreckage even happened. Don't argue, I whispered. My voice was barely above a breath. Don't sign anything. I thought about Diana's voice in that room, about the way she had said the word arrangements, like I was a piece of furniture being scheduled for pickup. I had wanted in that moment to stand up and say something, to defend myself, to remind everyone in that room that I had wired the electrical systems of half the buildings in this city, that I had put Michael through college, that I had held Eleanor's hand through 2 surgeries and a cancer diagnosis, without once, not once, letting her see me fall apart. Eleanor had known I would want to do that, and she had told me not to. Box 908, I said slowly, feeling each number in my mouth. First Heritage Bank. I had driven past First Heritage Bank 100 times. It was on Tryon Street, 4 blocks from the Meridian Tower, a old red brick building with brass door handles that Eleanor had always called the proper bank, as opposed to the credit union I used, which she called perfectly functional but not exactly inspiring. She had an account there. I had known that in the vague peripheral way I knew most things about our finances. She handled the bills, the savings, the taxes. I handled the work and trusted her with the rest. It was the arrangement we had settled into naturally, without discussion, the way long marriages settle into arrangements, not because one person is less capable, but because one person is simply better suited. I had never asked what kind of account. I had never asked the balance. I had never asked because I trusted her completely, the way you trust the wiring inside a wall you've never opened, because you put it there yourself and you know it was done right. But a safety deposit box. Eleanor had been going there regularly, quietly, without ever once mentioning it to me. Box 908. Don't let anyone know. My hands had steadied. The trembling was gone, replaced by something else entirely, a clarity that felt physical, like the moment on a job site, when you finally identify the fault in the circuit, and everything else stops mattering. I folded the letter back into thirds, slid it into the envelope, and put it back against my chest. Then I picked up my phone and typed First Heritage Bank Charlotte into the Maps app. 3.2 miles, open until 5. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine caught on the first try the way it always did. But before I pulled out of the parking space, I remembered something. A moment from 4 months ago, before Eleanor had gotten bad enough for the hospital. She had been sitting at her desk by the bedroom window, the little writing area where she kept her correspondence and her files, and she had looked up at me with an expression I hadn't been able to read at the time. "Bob," she had said, "there's a small brass key in the tin on my desk. The mint tin. You'll know when you need it." I had laughed and said something like, "You and your mysteries, Eleanor." And she had smiled but hadn't explained, and I had forgotten about it entirely until this moment, sitting in a parking garage 12 stories below the room, where our marriage had just been publicly dismissed. The mint tin. I knew exactly where it was. I put the truck in reverse. Maple Ridge Drive looked exactly the same as it always had on an October Monday morning. The Hendersons' dog was barking at something in the oak tree 2 houses down. Mrs. Patterson's wind chimes were going in the breeze off the back of her porch. The Bradford pear trees lining the sidewalk had started to turn their leaves, going from green to a deep, bruised burgundy at the edges. I had driven this street so many times over 35 years that my hands knew the last curve before the driveway without me telling them. I pulled in and cut the engine. The house was a 2-story colonial cream siding. Black shutters, the front garden still full of Eleanor's mums, orange and yellow, and a deep rust red because she had planted them in September, knowing she might not be there to see them bloom. That was Eleanor, planting flowers for someone else's October. I sat in the driveway for a minute before I could make myself go in. She planted those for you, I told myself out loud. She knew you'd need to see them. My throat burned saying it. The front door was unlocked. Diana hadn't sent anyone yet. The house was exactly as I had left it that morning. Coat rack by the door, Eleanor's reading glasses on the hall table, the small ceramic bowl where she kept her keys. The smell hit me the moment I stepped inside, coffee and lavender, and something underneath, both of those that was just the house itself, 35 years of a life lived here soaked into the walls and the floorboards. My knees nearly buckled. Don't, I told myself out loud again, because saying things out loud was the only way I knew to mean them. Not yet. Not right now. I kept moving. Through the foyer past the living room with its 2 mismatched armchairs that Eleanor had always meant to reupholster up the stairs. My hand dragged along the banister, and I thought involuntarily and painfully about the number of times I had come up these stairs in the dark so as not to wake her working boots in hand, smelling like copper wire and sawdust. The bedroom door was open. I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at the room. The bed was made, Eleanor's side turned down slightly, the way the hospice nurse had left it 2 weeks ago. Her reading lamp was still on the amber glow it cast across the nightstand, making the room look warm in a way that felt cruel under the circumstances. Her desk was by the window. The small roll top she had inherited from her mother, pigeonholes stuffed with correspondence, a ceramic cup of pens, a stack of books with paper scraps as bookmarks. I crossed the room and stood in front of it. The mint tin was on the left side of the desktop, between a small potted succulent and a framed photograph of the 2 of us at Lake Norman sometime in the 90s. We were both squinting into the sun. I was grinning like an idiot. Eleanor was laughing at something I had just said, her head tipped back, her whole face open. I picked up the photograph first. My eyes burned so badly I had to set it face down. Okay, I said, my voice thick and unsteady. Okay, the tin. I picked up the mint tin. It was a flat, rectangular tin, the kind that used to hold those little round peppermints, the green and white ones. The paint was worn at the corners from years of handling. I pried the lid open with my thumbnail. Inside was a small brass key, shorter than a house key with a round head and a number stamped into the metal. 908. My hand closed around it so fast I nearly dropped the tin. There you are, I breathed. A strip of masking tape was wrapped around the bow of the key, and in Eleanor's handwriting in letters small enough that I had to tilt the key toward the window light to read them 908, when you're ready. When you're ready. Not when you need it. Not in case of emergency. When you're ready. I stood at that window for a long time, key in my fist, looking out at the backyard. The oak tree we had planted together on our 10th anniversary, now taller than the roofline. The garden beds Eleanor had expanded every spring for 30 years. The tire swing I had hung for Michael when he was 7. Still there, the rope gray with age, the tire listing slightly to the left. What did you do, Eleanor? I asked the backyard. My voice broke on her name wide open, and I let it because there was no one to hear it. What did you do, sweetheart? The oak tree moved in the breeze. The tire swing turned slow and patient the way it always had. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. I pulled it out with my free hand. Diana's number. I'm having the locks changed at 4 p.m. today, not Monday. Please make sure you're not in the house. I read it twice. Then I slid the phone back into my pocket without responding and I looked down at the key in my palm. Eleanor had told me not to argue. She had told me not to sign anything. She had told me not to let anyone know about Box 908. She had not told me to hurry. But standing in her bedroom with Diana's deadline already moved up by 3 days, with the mint tin still open on the desk, and the photograph of us at the lake turned face down, because I couldn't bear to look at it. I understood something very clearly. Whatever was in that box, Eleanor had needed me to find it before anyone else started asking questions. I closed my hand around the key, slipped it into my breast pocket next to the letter, and buttoned my jacket. I gave the room one last look. The amber reading lamp, the turned-down bed, the ceramic cup of pens that no one would ever use again. "I'll come back for your things," I told her. "I promise." Then I walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, through the foyer that smelled like everything I had ever loved, and out the front door into the October air. I did not look at the mums. I got into the truck and pointed it toward Tryon Street. First Heritage Bank was the kind of building that made you stand up straighter just walking through the front door. It was old Charlotte. The real kind, red brick and brass fittings, and tall arched windows that let in light the way churches do, in long amber columns that fell across the marble floor and made the whole lobby feel like somewhere serious things happened. Eleanor had called it the proper bank for as long as I could remember, and standing on the sidewalk outside it for the first time, with a brass key in my breast pocket and a dead wife's instructions in my other pocket, I finally understood what she meant. I pushed through the heavy door and stepped inside. The lobby was quiet for a Monday afternoon. A young man in a navy suit was helping someone at the far end of the counter. 2 teller windows were open. A woman in her mid-50s with silver hair pulled back neatly looked up from her station as I approached her nameplate reading, "Patricia Owens, Customer Relations." "Good afternoon," she said, and her voice had that careful, professional warmth of someone trained to deliver bad news gently. "How can I help you today?" "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said. "Box 908. My wife held the account. She passed away 10 days ago." Patricia's expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a small softening around the eyes, the kind that tells you a person is actually listening and not just processing. "I'm very sorry for your loss," she said, and she meant it. "May I ask your name, sir?" "Robert Callahan, Bob." She turned to her computer and typed slowly, reading something on the screen. Then she stopped. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment longer than necessary before she looked back up at me. "Your wife was Eleanor Callahan?" she asked. "That's right. Mrs. Callahan has been a customer of ours since 1998, Patricia said carefully. Box 908 has been active and renewed annually. She paused. "You're listed as an authorized user on the account Mr. Callahan. Mrs. Callahan added you to the access authorization several years ago." My chest tightened. Eleanor had put my name on that account years ago, quietly, without telling me the same way she did everything that mattered. She had been planning this for a long time. "I'll need to see a death certificate and a photo ID," Patricia continued. "Standard procedure. I hope you understand." "I've got both right here," I said, reaching into the inside pocket of my jacket, where I'd kept the estate documents from the morning. "Had them with me all day." Patricia processed the paperwork with the careful efficiency of someone who respected documents, the way I respected live circuits, everything handled properly, nothing rushed. She made a copy of the death certificate, logged my ID, had me sign a form. "Mr. Callahan," she said quietly, as she handed back my originals. Mrs. Callahan came in regularly, usually once a month, sometimes more often. She glanced briefly toward the back of the lobby, then back at me. She was always very particular, very organized. She always knew exactly what she needed. "That sounds about right," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. Patricia picked up the phone on her desk and called someone named David to cover her station. Then she came around the counter. If you'll follow me, I'll take you down to the vault room. We went through a door behind the teller stations, down a short hallway, and then down a flight of stairs to the lower level. The temperature dropped noticeably as we descended. The vault room was long and narrow, lit with overhead fluorescents that gave everything a clean, bluish-white light. Rows of metal boxes lined both walls from floor to ceiling, each one numbered in small brass plates. "Box 908 is in the back," Patricia said, leading me down the center of the room. "Large format. Mrs. Callahan upgraded to the larger size in 2010. We stopped at the third-to-last box on the right side. It was bigger than I expected, roughly the size of a large briefcase laid flat." Patricia used the bank's master key on the left cylinder, then stepped aside. "Your key goes in the right one," she said. My hand was not steady when I reached into my pocket. I got the key out on the first try, but I fumbled it slightly against the lock before it found the slot. The tumblers turned. The box slid out on its runners with a sound like a long exhale. Patricia lifted it onto the viewing table in the center of the room. "Take all the time you need," she said. "I'll be right outside. Just knock when you're ready." She stepped out and pulled the door mostly closed. I stood alone in the vault room with the box in front of me and both hands flat on the edge of the table. I breathed in, I breathed out. Then I lifted the lid. There was no money, no jewelry, no stack of cash bound with rubber bands the way you saw in movies. What filled that box was paper organized with the precision of a woman who had spent 30 years teaching children how to think clearly. Folders, 8 of them, each a different color, each labeled in Eleanor's handwriting. A small black notebook with an elastic band around it. A USB drive in a clear plastic case. And on top of everything, placed deliberately, where it would be the first thing I touched, a white envelope. My name on the front. "Lord have mercy, Eleanor," I whispered, and my voice cracked straight down the middle. I reached for the envelope first, then I stopped. My eyes moved to the folders. One of them, a dark green folder near the back of the box, had no printed label. Just a single handwritten letter in the bottom right corner of the tab, written in black ink. D. My stomach dropped 3 floors. I knew what that letter stood for. I knew it the way you know a circuit is live before you touch it. A feeling in the air, a warmth that tells you to be careful. I pulled the envelope off the top of the pile and set it to one side, face down. Then I reached for the green folder. The first page inside the green folder was a handwritten note from Eleanor dated 3 years earlier, the summer before she got sick. Her handwriting was steady and deliberate, the way it always was when she was writing something she had thought about for a long time. "I don't know what I'll find," she had written, "but I know what I've already seen. And a mother doesn't unsee things like that." I pulled up the metal stool from under the viewing table and sat down because my legs were no longer interested in holding me up. "Talk to me, Elle," I said out loud to the folder, to the vault room, to wherever she was. "Tell me what you saw." The folder was organized into sections separated by small adhesive tabs. The first section was labeled Timeline. It was a handwritten chronology, dated entries going back to early 2019, roughly 2 years after Michael and Diana had gotten married. March 2019. Eleanor had written, Diana mentioned her financial advisor for the first time. Said it casually, the way people mention things they don't want you to ask about. Michael didn't react. I wrote it down because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I turned the page. June 2019. Found paperwork in the guest room while Diana was staying over. Not snooping, the papers were on the nightstand face up. A brokerage statement. Account holder, Diana R. Callahan. The account was opened in 2015, 2 years before the wedding. Balance significant. I took a photo with my phone. I don't know why. I just knew I needed to. My jaw tightened so hard my back teeth ached. She had her own account, I said out loud. Before she ever married my son. I kept reading. August 2020. Asked Michael casually if he and Diana had combined finances. He laughed and said mostly. I asked what that meant. He changed the subject. He's good at changing the subject. He learned that from his father. A small arrow pointed to a note in the margin. Sorry, Bob. You know it's true. Despite everything, despite the vault room and the fluorescent lights and the folder full of things that were making my hands shake, I let out a sound that was almost a laugh. Even in her private notes, Eleanor found a way to tease me, but the laugh died fast. The next section of the folder was labeled LLC. Eleanor had found through what she described only as some research I did at the library and online that Diana was the sole registered agent of a limited liability company incorporated in Delaware in 2016, 1 year before the wedding. The company was called Renfield Consulting, LLC, and it had no public-facing website, no listed employees, and no obvious business purpose that Eleanor could identify. Regular transfers into Diana's personal account from Renfield, Eleanor had written. Consistent amounts, monthly, going back years. Michael's name is nowhere on any of it. My chest felt like something was sitting on it. She was building a nest egg, I said, the whole time, before she even said I do. The third section was the one that made the vault room feel 10 degrees colder. It was a printout of an email chain. Eleanor had typed a header note at the top forwarded from Diana's email. Diana left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I only read what was already on the screen. I am not ashamed of that. The emails were between Diana and an attorney named Philip Garrett, not Gerald Hawkins, a different attorney entirely based in Raleigh. The subject line was Estate Planning Scenario B. The earliest email in the chain was dated February 2021. Diana had written, I want to understand what happens to the Callahan estate. If the elder Mr. Callahan predeceases Mrs. Callahan versus if Mrs. Callahan predeceases him. I'm asking about both scenarios because I want to be prepared. Philip Garrett had replied with a detailed breakdown. In the scenario where Eleanor died first, he explained the marital assets would go through probate, and Robert Callahan, as surviving spouse, would have elective share rights under North Carolina law, meaning he could claim up to 1/3 of the net estate. Garrett had then written, however, if Mrs. Callahan structures her estate planning carefully in advance, it is possible to minimize the elective share exposure through trust instruments and beneficiary designations that fall outside the probate estate entirely. Diana had replied, that's exactly what I wanted to know. What do we need to do to make sure that happens? I put the pages down on the table. Flat. Very carefully. The way you set down a live wire. My hands were trembling so badly, the papers rattled against the metal surface. She went to a lawyer, I said. My voice came out raw and strange, like it belonged to someone older. She went to a lawyer 4 years ago to figure out how to cut me out. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, and Eleanor knew. The words felt like rocks in my mouth. Eleanor knew all of this. She knew, and she never said a word to me. I pressed both palms flat on the table and stared at the folder. My eyes were burning. Not quite tears, but close, that particular heat behind the eyes that comes right before everything gives way. Then I thought about what Eleanor had written in her very first note. A mother doesn't unsee things like that. She hadn't told me because she was protecting me. She knew me well enough to know that if I had found out about this, I would have walked straight into Michael's house and said exactly what I thought loudly and without diplomacy, and Diana would have had exactly the ammunition she needed to drive a permanent wedge between me and my son. Eleanor had taken all of that fury and grief and channeled it into something else entirely. Into preparation. Into documentation. Into a green folder in a vault room on Tryon Street. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. You were protecting me, I said softly. Even then. You were always protecting me. I put the green folder aside and looked at the rest of the box. 7 more folders, a black notebook, a USB drive in a clear plastic case. My eyes landed on the USB. Eleanor had placed it toward the back of the box, away from everything else. No label, Just a strip of masking tape across the top with 3 words written in red ink, the red she only used when she really meant something. Watch this last. My hand moved toward it before I caught myself. Watch this last. If Eleanor said last, she meant last. In 45 years, I had learned the hard way that there was always a reason for the order in which she did things. I picked up the USB, turned it over once in my fingers, and set it back down exactly where it had been. Then I picked up the white envelope from where I'd set it face down at the start of all this. My name, her handwriting. I pressed it between both palms, like something I was afraid to break, and for just a moment, I let myself feel the full weight of what was happening. My wife was gone. My son had looked at the table. My daughter-in-law had spent years engineering a future in which I did not exist. And Eleanor, my Eleanor, had spent those same years building something I didn't yet understand, something that had brought me here to this room, to this box with a brass key and a broken heart, and the slowly dawning sense that the woman I had been married to for 45 years was about 10 steps ahead of everyone in this story, including me. I opened the envelope. The letter was 4 pages long. Eleanor's handwriting covered every line, small and precise the way she wrote, when she had a great deal to say and wanted to say all of it without wasting a single inch of paper. I pulled the stool closer to the viewing table, spread the pages flat under the fluorescent light, and began to read. My darling Bob, she had written. If you're reading this, you found the tin. Of course you found the tin. You always remember the things I say when you think you're not paying attention. My throat tightened so fast it surprised me. I need to explain some things, she continued. Not because I owe you an explanation, but because you are the most honest man I have ever known, and honest men deserve honest answers. I pressed my palm flat on the page to keep my hands from shaking. She wrote about Diana. Not with bitterness, not with the cold fury I might have expected, but with the measured sadness of a woman who had watched something happen slowly and couldn't stop it. She wrote about the brokerage statement she had seen on the nightstand, about the LLC she had found, about the emails with Philip Garrett. I didn't tell you, she wrote, because I knew what you would do. You would have gone straight to Michael and said exactly what you thought, the way you always do, the way I love you for, and Diana would have used it to push Michael further away from us. I couldn't let that happen. So I did what I do best. I planned. Lord Eleanor, I whispered, and my voice broke completely on her name. She wrote about the safety deposit box, about the second envelope at the bottom of the box, the one she called the real letter, the one she said I should take to a man named Douglas Webb at First Heritage Bank when the time came. She described Webb as the most careful and trustworthy financial advisor I have ever worked with, which is saying something because I have worked with several. Then she wrote the line that made my eyes burn so badly I had to stop reading for a full minute. Bob, I need you to know something. Whatever happens in that room with Gerald Hawkins, whatever Diana says, whatever Michael doesn't say, one of it is the truth of our marriage. The truth of our marriage is 45 years of Friday evenings, when you came home dirty and tired and handed me your paycheck with that proud look on your face. The truth is that you trusted me completely every single time without question, without hesitation. That kind of trust is not ordinary. That kind of trust is everything. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and pressed it against my chest with both hands. I stood like that for a long moment, in the cold vault room. Eyes shut, jaw clenched so hard, my teeth hurt, doing the thing Eleanor always said I did best, holding it all in until I was somewhere safe. Patricia knocked softly on the door. Mr. Callahan, are you all right in there? Fine, I called back, and my voice was steadier than I had any right to expect. Just need another minute. Take all the time you need, sir. I looked at the USB drive still sitting in its clear plastic case at the back of the box. Eleanor's red ink. Watch this last. I picked it up and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I repacked the folders carefully, locked the box, and knocked on the door. Patricia walked me back upstairs. At the lobby, she touched my arm briefly, professional but genuine. "Mr. Callahan, if there's anything the bank can assist you with during this time, please don't hesitate to come in." "There is one thing," I said. "Is Mr. Douglas Webb available?" My wife mentioned him by name. Patricia's expression changed slightly, a quiet recognition. "Mr. Webb is our senior wealth management advisor. He's in a client meeting until 5. I can leave him a message that you'd like to speak with him." "Please," I said. "Tell him Eleanor Callahan's husband came in. He'll know what that means." I pushed through the brass doors and stepped back out onto Tryon Street. The October air hit me cold and clean. Diana had changed the locks at 4. I had nowhere to go but forward. I got out my phone and called the only person I trusted without reservation. James Wheeler picked up on the second ring the way he always did. "Bob, how'd the will reading go?" "About as bad as you'd expect," I said. A pause, then, "Get over here. Martha made pot roast." "James, I need to use your laptop tonight." Another pause, shorter this time. "How bad is bad? I'll tell you everything when I get there." "Door's unlocked," he said. "Drive safe." James Wheeler and I had known each other since 1981, when we were both young men pulling 12-hour shifts on the First Union Building. Downtown, 2 electricians in a crew of 20 who somehow ended up eating lunch on the same beam every day for 6 months. 44 years. He had been at my wedding, at Michael's birth, at Eleanor's funeral. If there was one person on this earth who would sit with me through whatever was on that USB drive and not flinch, it was James. His kitchen was everything my life wasn't. At that moment, warm and bright, smelling of pot roast and coffee. His wife Martha's handmade curtains on the windows, and a tabby cat named Roosevelt asleep on the radiator. Martha had already gone to bed by the time I arrived, but James had left a plate covered in foil on the stove and 2 mugs on the counter. "Sit down," he said, pouring coffee without asking if I wanted any. "Eat something first. You look like a man who forgot lunch." "I did forget lunch." "Then eat." He pushed the plate toward me, pulled out a chair, and sat down across the table with both hands wrapped around his mug. "Talk while you eat. Tell me everything." So I told him. All of it, from the vault room to the folder marked D to Eleanor's letter. James listened the way he always listened, without interrupting. His face doing the work of responding. Eyebrows going up at the LLC, jaw tightening at the emails with Philip Garrett. A long, slow exhale at the part about Diana planning to cut me out 4 years before Eleanor even got sick. When I finished, James set down his mug and rubbed the back of his neck. "So Eleanor knew all of this." "She knew all of it," I said. "And she didn't tell you because she knew I'd blow it up," I said. "She was right." James nodded slowly. "So what's on the drive?" I put the USB on the table between us. We both looked at it. "Eleanor wrote, 'Watch this last,'" I said. "In red." "Red means serious," James said. Everything Eleanor wrote in red was serious. James stood up, walked to the counter, and came back with his laptop. He set it open between us, took the USB from the table, and held it up. "You want to do this tonight?" "I want to do this right now," I said. He plugged it in. 1 file. No name, just a date. March 14th, 2021. 4 years ago. James clicked play. The video was shot on a phone, slightly unsteady, the angle low, like it had been set on a surface rather than held. The room was a living room I didn't recognize immediately, pale gray walls, a white sectional sofa, afternoon light, coming through plantation shutters. Then I recognized the shutters. They were in Michael's old apartment, the one he and Diana had lived in before they bought the house in Ballantyne. Diana was on the sofa, her back half turned to the camera phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing at something the person on the other end had said. Then her voice shifted, dropping into the tone I had heard in the Hawkins conference room that morning. Flat, deliberate, sure of itself. "Oh, the old man," she said. He's got nothing. Seriously, nothing. 45 years as an electrician, a union pension, and whatever social security he's pulling. That's it. A pause while the other person spoke. Then Diana again, and her laugh this time had an edge to it, like a blade wrapped in silk. When Bob's wife dies, I'll have him out of that house before he figures out what hit him. Michael won't fight me on it. He never fights me on anything. Another pause. No, I'm not worried. The man spent his whole life pulling wire in other people's walls. He doesn't even know what a trust document looks like. The video ran for another 40 seconds of Diana discussing something about a restaurant reservation. Then it cut off. James closed the laptop slowly. I sat with both hands flat on the table staring at the wood grain. My ears were ringing the way they did sometimes after a long day on a loud job site. My chest felt scraped hollow. Bob. James's voice was careful, the way you spoke to someone standing close to a ledge. She said it 4 years ago, I said. My voice came out strange, like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. 4 years ago, Diana already had the whole thing planned out. She did, James said, and Eleanor was there. I looked up. Eleanor was there. She had the camera running. She saw and heard everything. James leaned forward, both elbows on the table. Eleanor didn't just know Bob. She documented it. She built a case. I pressed the heels of both hands against my eyes until I saw white. When I pulled them away, the kitchen was still warm and bright, Roosevelt was still asleep on the radiator, and everything was exactly the same as it had been 5 minutes ago, except that I was not the same man who had sat down at this table. There's still the second envelope, I said. The one in the vault. Eleanor said to take it to Douglas Webb. James straightened. When? I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. 8:47 p.m. First thing tomorrow morning, I said. James went to bed at 10, but I didn't even try to sleep. I sat at his kitchen table, with the pot roast plate pushed to one side, and Eleanor's 4-page letter spread out in front of me again, reading it for the 3rd time by the light of the overhead lamp. Roosevelt had migrated from the radiator to the chair beside me at some point, and every so often he pressed his head against my forearm, in the particular way cats have of acknowledging grief without making a fuss about it. I was grateful for the company. The 2nd and 3rd pages of Eleanor's letter were about money, not about Diana, not about Michael. Just about money and where it had come from and what she had done with it, written with the matter-of-fact clarity of a woman who wanted to make absolutely sure I understood every word. You remember how you used to hand me your paycheck every Friday, she had written. You'd come in the back door still in your work clothes, smelling like copper and sweat, and you'd put that check on the kitchen counter with both hands like you were making an offering. And you were Bob. That's exactly what it was. My throat clenched. I remembered those Friday evenings like I remembered breathing. Starting in 1985, she wrote, I began taking a small amount from each deposit before I transferred the rest to our household account. Small amounts. $20 some weeks. $50 when things were good. Never enough that you'd notice, never enough to affect the grocery budget or the electric bill. I invested it. I set the page down and picked it back up. I know you're going to say I should have told you. You're right. I should have. But Bob, in 1985, you were working 60-hour weeks and coming home exhausted, and the last thing you needed was me telling you I was playing the stock market with our grocery money. So I didn't tell you. I told myself I'd tell you when it became something worth telling you about. Eleanor, I said out loud to the letter to the kitchen, to wherever she was, you absolute marvel. She had started with utility stocks. Duke Energy, Consolidated Edison, companies that provided power and water and gas, the kind of businesses that people needed regardless of what the economy was doing. She had reinvested every dividend. She had added to her positions during market downturns because, as she wrote, your father always said buy when things are on sale, and I never found a reason to disagree with him. By the mid-90s, she had expanded into blue-chip technology companies. By the early 2000s, she had added real estate investment trusts. She had never speculated. She had never chased trends. She had simply been patient and consistent for 4 decades the way she was patient and consistent about everything that mattered to her. Then she wrote the sentence that made my eyes fill completely spilling over before I could stop them. The money came from your work, Bob. Every dollar of it. You earned it with your hands and your back and 45 years of showing up every single day without complaint. All I did was make sure it didn't disappear. I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth and held it there. Don't you cry all over my letter. I could almost hear her saying in that voice she used when she was teasing me about something she actually found endearing. I worked very hard on that paper. I laughed a wet, broken sound in the empty kitchen and wiped my face with the dish towel from the counter. Roosevelt chirped from the chair beside me, which I chose to interpret as sympathy. The 4th page of the letter was about Douglas Webb. Webb has managed the investment accounts for 15 years, Eleanor wrote. He is thorough, ethical, and completely trustworthy. He also has a sense of humor, which I consider essential in a financial advisor. I have left him a sealed envelope with instructions for what to do when you come to him. He's been expecting you. Don't be intimidated by him. He's a very tall man, but he's mostly harmless. I shook my head at the page. She had written a character description of her financial advisor. In her final letter to me, because she absolutely knew that I would be walking in there without the first idea of what to expect, and she wanted me to feel okay about it. The 2nd envelope is at the bottom of the box behind the folders, she wrote. I know you didn't open it yet. You never open the last present first. That's one of the things I've always loved about you. She was right. It was sitting in the vault right now, still sealed exactly where I had left it, because I had run out of time and emotional capacity in one afternoon to deal with everything Eleanor had packed into that box. Take it to Webb, she wrote. He'll explain the rest. And Bob, don't let anyone rush you. Not Diana, not Michael, not anyone. You have time. I made sure of it. I folded the letter back into its envelope. Then I picked up my phone and opened the Maps app. First Heritage Bank. 9 a.m. opening. I dialed James's number. He picked up after 4 rings, groggy and confused. Bob, it's past midnight. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I said. I need you to come with me to the bank tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. A pause. I could hear him sitting up in bed, the old springs of his mattress creaking. To the bank, he repeated. First Heritage Bank. There's a 2nd envelope in the vault that I didn't open today. Eleanor said to take it to the financial advisor. His name is Douglas Webb. Another pause longer this time. Bob, how big is this thing, whatever Eleanor set up? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But she used the word rest when she said Webb would explain it. As in, he'd explain the rest. Like what I've already found is only part of it. James exhaled slowly. All right, he said. 9 o'clock. I'll drive. You don't have to drive, James. I know I don't have to, he said. That's not why I'm doing it. Now get some sleep. You sound like a man who's been awake for 20 hours. 19, I said. Close enough. Good night, Bob. Good night, James, and thank you. He made a sound that was not quite words. The particular sound of a man who had been your friend for 44 years and considered thanks unnecessary at this point. Then he hung up. I sat for another minute at the kitchen table with Eleanor's letter in my hands and the lamp making a warm circle of light in the dark kitchen. I thought about the 2nd envelope sitting in Vault 908 waiting. I thought about Douglas Webb and whatever he was going to explain. I thought about Eleanor in 1985 slipping $20 into an investment account while I came through the back door smelling like copper wire and thinking she was paying the electric bill. What else did you do? I asked her quietly into the warm stillness of James's kitchen. What else did you build for me when I wasn't looking? The house gave no answer, but the question itself felt different from the ones I had been asking all day. Less like grief, more like wonder. I turned off the kitchen lamp and lay down on James's sofa. For the first time since Eleanor died, I fell asleep quickly. James made coffee at 7:30 without being asked the way good friends do. I was already sitting at his kitchen table when he came downstairs, still in yesterday's clothes. Eleanor's letter folded in my breast pocket, and the USB drive sitting on the table beside my phone. James took one look at me and went straight to the coffee maker without saying a word about the fact that I clearly hadn't moved in several hours. "You sleep at all?" he asked, filling both mugs. "A few hours," I said. "Enough. You look like a man who slept in his clothes on a sofa." He set a mug in front of me and sat down. "Which is exactly what you did, so I suppose that tracks." "James," I said. "Bob, thank you for last night." He waved it off with one hand. 44 years. Don't thank me for 44 years. He wrapped both hands around his mug and looked at me steadily. "You ready to go back to that bank?" "More than ready," I said. We were parked outside First Heritage Bank at 8:55. James had driven as promised in his old Bronco that smelled like motor oil and pine air freshener, and he had kept the radio on classic country the whole way because he knew I needed noise that didn't require a response. That was James. He always knew. Patricia Owens was already at her station when we walked in. She looked up, recognized me immediately, and something in her expression shifted, a careful, professional alertness, like someone who had been expecting this visit. "Mr. Callahan," she said warmly. "Good morning. And this is James Wheeler," I said. "He's with me, he's family." James nodded once at Patricia. She smiled. "Of course," she said. "I got your message from yesterday about Mr. Webb. He's available this morning and would very much like to meet with you." She lowered her voice slightly. "He said to tell you he's been expecting your call." My chest tightened. Of course he had. Eleanor had told him I was coming, just like she had told me he was coming. She had set the whole thing up like a series of falling dominoes, each one perfectly placed, each one waiting for the right moment. Patricia led us down to the vault room first. I opened box 908, reached past the folders and the black notebook, and found it exactly where Eleanor had placed it, at the very bottom of the box, pressed flat against the back corner. A thick envelope, cream-colored, sealed with wax. Not ordinary white envelope wax. Deep burgundy, the color of the curtains in our old dining room, pressed with a small circular stamp. In the center of the wax seal, Eleanor had pressed her initial, E. "Good Lord," James breathed beside me. "She planned everything," I said. My voice came out hushed, almost reverent. Right down to the wax seal. I picked it up carefully, holding it with both hands. The envelope was heavier than I expected. Whatever was inside was substantial, not just a letter, but documents folded and ordered and sealed by a woman who had spent decades making sure things were done properly. I did not open it in the vault room. I tucked it under my arm and locked the box. Patricia brought us upstairs to the second floor to a part of the bank I hadn't seen before, quieter, carpeted in navy blue with dark wood paneling, and the kind of framed landscape prints that said serious money was managed here. She knocked on the last door on the right. "Come in," said a voice. Douglas Webb was a tall man, exactly as Eleanor had warned me. 6'3" at least, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped silver hair, and the kind of handshake that said he had been working with people during the most important moments of their lives for a very long time. He was somewhere in his early 60s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a desk covered in neatly organized files. He stood the moment I walked in and came around the desk with his hand extended. "Mr. Callahan," he said, and his voice was warm and unhurried. "I'm Douglas Webb. I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time." He paused and something genuine moved across his face. "Eleanor talked about you often. She was very proud of you." My throat closed up so fast I had to clear it twice before I could answer. "She never mentioned you," I managed, "which knowing Eleanor means she trusted you completely." Webb smiled at that, a real smile, the kind that reached the corners of his eyes. That's the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about her. He gestured to the chairs. Please, both of you sit down. Can I get you anything? Just answers, I said. Then let's start there, he said, and sat back down behind his desk. I placed the cream envelope on the desk between us. Webb looked at it, then at me. She told me about the wax seal, he said quietly. She said you'd bring it when you were ready, that you'd know when ready was. I'm ready, I said. Webb opened his desk drawer and produced a silver letter opener, handed it to me handle first. It should be you, he said simply. I broke the seal. Before the biggest twist, I need to know you're still with me. Comment 8 below just the number. I read every one. A quick note. The next part includes fictional elements created for storytelling and reflection. If that's not for you, it's okay to stop here. If you stay, the truth is just ahead. The envelope contained 3 things. A cover letter in Eleanor's handwriting, 2 pages. A summary document printed on First Heritage Bank letterhead, 4 pages dense with numbers and account details. And a smaller sealed note with 3 words on the outside in red ink. Read this last. Webb watched me lay each item on the desk without reaching for any of them. He understood I could tell that I needed to see everything before I touched anything. Walk me through it, I said. All of it. Don't skip anything. Webb leaned forward, laced his fingers together on the desk. Mr. Callahan, your wife came to me for the first time in the fall of 2008. The financial crisis had just hit. Most of my clients were panicking, selling everything, trying to minimize losses. He paused. Eleanor came in with a yellow legal pad covered in handwritten calculations and asked me to help her buy more. James made a sound beside me that was half laugh, half disbelief. She had been investing independently since the mid-'80s, Webb continued. Mostly in utility stocks and blue-chip companies. By 2008, she had built a portfolio worth just under $400,000. She wanted professional management to take it further. $400,000. In 2008, built from $20 increments starting in 1985. I started crying right there, and I'm not ashamed of it, I said, and my voice broke clean down the middle. I pressed my knuckles hard against my mouth. 23 years of $20 bills. Webb gave me a moment. He was good at giving people moments. Over the next 15 years, he said, his voice steady and gentle, we grew that portfolio significantly. Eleanor was an exceptional client. She never panicked, never chased trends. She had one rule that she repeated to me every single year at our annual review. Webb looked me straight in the eyes. She said, Douglas, this money belongs to Bob. It came from his work. Make sure it's still there when he needs it. The tears were running down my face, and I didn't try to stop them. James reached over and put his hand on my forearm, and I was grateful for the weight of it. Every year, I said. She said that every year. Every year, Webb confirmed, without fail. I reached for the bank summary document and turned to the first page. Webb reached over and pointed to the bottom line of the first column. I read the number. I read it again. Then I set the paper down flat on the desk, pressed both palms on top of it, and stared at the wall behind Webb's head for a full 10 seconds, because I needed somewhere neutral to look, while my brain tried to make sense of what my eyes had just seen. $70 million, I said. The words felt like something borrowed, like they belonged in someone else's sentence. $70 million. $72.4 million as of last Friday's close, Webb said. The number fluctuates slightly with market movement, but the core figure is stable. James exhaled beside me like a man who'd been punched very gently in the sternum. Bob, he said. Bob. I hear you, James, I said. $72 million. I heard you the first time. I'm just saying the real number because I need to hear it twice. Despite everything. Despite the tears still on my face and the absolute earthquake happening somewhere inside my chest, I almost smiled at that. Webb continued, his voice calm and professional. The voice of someone who had delivered large numbers to stunned people before. and understood that what they needed was clarity. The trust was formally established in 2015 as a revocable living trust with Eleanor as the grantor and trustee during her lifetime. Upon her death, the trust became irrevocable, and you, Robert James Callahan, became the sole beneficiary and successor trustee. He let that settle for a moment. This means the assets transfer to you automatically outside of probate court. No judge reviews it. No one can contest it through the will. It is a completely separate legal instrument. I looked up sharply. Diana can't challenge it. Diana has no legal standing to challenge it, Webb said, and there was just the faintest edge of satisfaction in his voice. The trust was drafted by a specialty estate planning attorney here in Charlotte, reviewed annually, and signed by Eleanor while she was in full legal and mental capacity, documented with physician attestation at every annual review. It is Mr. Callahan about as bulletproof as a legal document can be. Eleanor made sure, I said. Eleanor made absolutely sure, Webb agreed. She was meticulous. I have worked in wealth management for 31 years. I have never had a client who was more prepared, more organized, or more deliberate in protecting someone they loved. I picked up Eleanor's cover letter. Her handwriting, that careful right-leaning cursive, filled both pages. I read the first paragraph out loud because I needed to hear her voice, even if it was my voice carrying her words. Bob, I read. By the time you read this, you will have sat in Gerald Hawkins's office and received one envelope and watched Diana smile. I need you to know that I planned it exactly that way. I wanted them to feel certain. Certainty makes people careless, and careless people make mistakes. James let out a long, slow breath. She set a trap. She set a trap. I confirmed, and my voice cracked again, but I kept reading. The assets in the will, the house, the investment portfolio, the education trust represent everything I wanted Michael and his family to have. Those are real gifts freely given with love. But they are not the whole picture. They are what I wanted Diana to see. What I wanted her to believe was everything. I had to stop. My chest was so full of something that didn't have a name that I couldn't breathe properly for a moment. I pressed the letter flat on the desk and pulled in 3 slow breaths the way Eleanor had taught me to do during her chemo treatments when I was trying not to fall apart in the hospital room. She thought of everything, I said. She thought of absolutely everything. Read the last line of page 2, Webb said quietly. I turned the page, found the last paragraph. The electrician they called foolish kept the lights on in this family for 45 years, I read. Not because he had to, because he chose to, every single day. That choice is worth more than any number I could write on a page. But since I know you, Bob Callahan, I know you would rather have the number 2. So here it is. Every cent of it. You earned it. I folded the letter and held it against my chest with both hands. My shoulders were shaking. The tears were coming properly now, not the restrained kind I had managed yesterday, but the deep, full kind that came from somewhere below the chest, the kind Eleanor always called the real ones. James gripped my forearm harder. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Webb gave us a long moment before he spoke again, his voice low and respectful. Mr. Callahan, there's one more item. The small sealed note. I had forgotten it. The red ink. Read this last. I picked it up, broke the seal with my thumbnail. Inside was a single index card. 3 sentences in Eleanor's handwriting. Don't let them rush you. Don't let them guilt you. And don't you dare apologize for any of it. I laughed. Through the tears, through the shaking shoulders, through $72.4 million sitting in a document on Douglas Webb's desk, I laughed out loud in that quiet second-floor office because Eleanor was still telling me what to do from wherever she was, and she was still absolutely right. Okay, Elle, I said to the index card, to the ceiling, to the October sky outside the window. Okay. Webb leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and smiled at me, like a man who had been waiting a long time to watch this particular moment happen. "Shall we discuss next steps?" he asked. "Give me 1 more minute," I said. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Callahan," he said. "Eleanor made sure you have plenty of it." The apartment on Midtown Park Avenue was smaller than our old bedroom on Maple Ridge Drive, and I mean that literally. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a single window that looked out over a parking lot, doing its best impression of something cheerful. The furniture had come with the lease, a beige sofa that had seen better decades, a round table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a bed that was perfectly adequate and felt absolutely nothing like home. I had moved in with 2 duffel bags, a cardboard box of books, and Eleanor's letter folded carefully in my breast pocket. That was it. That was everything I had brought with me into this new chapter of my life, and standing there on that first night, looking at those bare walls, I had thought, this is what starting over feels like at 67. James had offered his spare room. I had said no without hesitating. "I need to learn how to be alone," I told him, and he had nodded slowly, his jaw tight because James Wheeler had known me for 44 years, and he understood immediately the way only a man who has loved you that long can understand that this was something I needed to do for myself. He didn't push. He never pushed. That was day 1. By day 7, I had built myself a routine the way you build a small fire in the cold, carefully, deliberately, because it's the only warmth you've got. Coffee at 6:30, standing at the window in my undershirt, watching the parking lot below shake itself awake. Delivery drivers, a woman walking a golden retriever, an old man in a blue jacket, who appeared every morning at precisely 6:42 and sat on the same concrete bench and read a folded newspaper. I had started to look forward to seeing him. By day 4, I was rooting for him. A walk around the block at 7. A bowl of oatmeal at 7:30 that Eleanor would have described as aggressively plain, her words, not mine, because I had never once learned to make it the way she did, with brown sugar and banana slices and that pinch of nutmeg that made the whole kitchen smell like Sunday morning. My version tasted like warm cardboard. I ate it every day anyway because the ritual of making it made me feel like I was still tethered to something. Then I would sit in the round table with Eleanor's letter and read it again, 1 page at a time, the way you read something that holds more than any single sitting can contain. James called every morning at 9 on the dot, without fail, without exception. "Still breathing?" he'd ask, and his voice would be careful and rough, at the same time the voice of a man trying to sound casual when he was anything but. "Still breathing," I'd answer. "Good. Martha made biscuits. I'm heading over." "James, you really don't need to." 9:15, he'd cut me off firmly. "Unlock the door, Bob." And every morning at 9:15, James would appear at my door with biscuits wrapped in foil, still warm from Martha's oven, and he would sit across from me at the round table and drink his coffee and not ask me a single question I wasn't ready to answer. 44 years of friendship had taught us both something that most people never learn, that sometimes the most powerful thing another person can do for you is simply stay in the room while you put yourself back together. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Douglas Webb, "Mr. Callahan." He said, his voice carrying that same unhurried steadiness that had anchored me during our first meeting. "I'm calling to let you know the formal trust notification goes out this Friday. Standard procedure, every party named in the estate receives written notification of any trust instruments connected to the deceased. Michael and Diana will both receive letters." My stomach dropped 2 floors. "They find out Friday." "Yes," Webb said simply. "I wanted you to have a few days to prepare. Are you ready for that?" "As ready as I'm ever going to be," I said, and even I could hear the uncertainty threading through my voice. "Good." Webb's tone was firm and reassuring at once. "Mr. Callahan, I want to remind you of something important. Trust assets are legally distinct from the will. Diana's attorney can generate noise, and he will, but there is no valid legal ground for a contest. Eleanor structured this with extraordinary care. 10 times over, I'd say. She told me in the letter, I said. She said Diana would try. She told me exactly the same thing, Webb said, and there was a warmth in his voice that went beyond professional courtesy, the warmth of a man who had genuinely liked his client as a human being. She said, and I'm quoting her directly, Diana will put up a fight because that's what Diana does. Make sure Bob knows it won't work. I pressed the phone hard against my ear and stared out at the parking lot. My eyes were burning. They had been doing that all week, not full crying, just that persistent aching heat that rose and receded without warning like a tide with its own private schedule. She thought of absolutely everything, I said, my voice barely holding. She absolutely did, Webb said quietly. Mr. Callahan, right now your only job is to wait. Let the process do what it was designed to do. Call me the moment anything comes up. Thursday came and went like a held breath. That night, sleep refused me. At 2 a.m, I gave up fighting. It climbed out of bed and made tea the way Eleanor used to make it, bag left in too long, because I always forgot to pull it out before it went bitter. I took the mug to the beige sofa, spread her letter across my knees, and turned to the page I had been circling all week without letting myself land on it. Page 3. The part about us. Do you remember our third date? She had written. You were 40 minutes late because you heard a building super shouting 2 blocks from the restaurant, and you stopped because you knew exactly what the problem was. You arrived with a burn mark on your right forearm, and your good shirt untucked, and your face full of apology. I thought you were the finest man I had ever met. A sound came out of my chest that wasn't a word. It was something lower than language, something that had been waiting in the dark under my ribs for days. You have spent 45 years being the finest man I ever met, she had written. Not because you were perfect, because you were present. Every single time without fail you showed up. That is the whole story, Bob. That is every single bit of it. I pressed the letter against my face with both hands and wept. Completely. Without restraint. I cried for Eleanor and for that third date, and for the faint scar on my right forearm that I still carried. I cried for 45 years that had somehow been more than I deserved, and exactly what I had needed. I cried until my chest throbbed and my eyes were swollen, and there was simply nothing left inside me to release. When it was finally over, I felt hollow in the way that a room feels hollow right after it's been cleaned, emptied of dust, emptied of weight, ready for something new. I folded the letter with great care, set it on the table, and slept straight through until 8 the following morning. Friday had arrived. I was on my second cup of coffee when the phone started ringing. 7:53 a.m. Michael's name on the screen. I watched it ring through, set the phone face down on the table, and finished my coffee standing at the window, watching a woman walk her golden retriever through the parking lot below. The dog kept stopping to investigate every crack in the pavement with absolute dedication, the way dogs do, like every square foot of ground contained a story worth reading. The phone lit up again. Michael, 8:01, then again 8:04, then a text, Dad, please pick up. I put on my jacket, pocketed the phone, and went for my walk. The park 2 blocks over was half empty on a Friday morning, just a few joggers and an old man feeding pigeons near the fountain. I did 2 full laps before the phone rang for the 9th time. I stopped on the path, looked at Michael's name on the screen, and answered. Michael. My voice came out calm, steady. Eleanor would have been pleased. Dad! His voice was high and tight, the voice of a man whose morning had already gone sideways before 9 a.m. Dad, we got a letter from First Heritage Bank about a trust. It says there's a... He stopped. I could hear him breathing. Dad, what is this? It's exactly what it says it is, I said. $72 million. His voice cracked on the number like a teenager whose voice hadn't finished changing. Dad, that's not where did that even, how did Mom? Then I heard it. Diana's voice in the background, sharp and rapid, the way she talked when she was working through a problem out loud and not caring who heard. Give me the phone, Michael. Give me the phone right now. A rustling sound. Then Diana's voice directly in my ear, and every trace of the manufactured warmth she sometimes performed for family occasions was gone. What was left was the voice from the video. Flat. Precise. Furious. Mr. Callahan, she said, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I want you to understand something very clearly. This is not over. Good morning, Diana, I said. Don't good morning me. Her voice shook slightly, and I realized with something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but was adjacent to it, that she was actually rattled. Diana, who had stood in Gerald Hawkins's office and dismantled me with surgical calm, was rattled. This trust, whatever Eleanor set up, it is going to be contested. My attorney is already looking at it. Mental capacity, undue influence, improper execution. There are grounds here. There aren't, I said, and I kept my voice gentle, the way you keep your voice when you're telling someone a hard truth and you don't want to make it worse than it has to be. Eleanor had that trust reviewed every single year by a licensed estate planning attorney and her physician. It's airtight, Diana, she made sure. You don't know that. I do know that, I said. She told me, in the letter she left me in the vault. A pause, short, but I caught it. Give Michael back his phone, I said. Please. Another rustling sound. Then Michael's voice quieter now. Dad. Michael, I said. I'd like to meet with you. Just you. Sunday 2 o'clock. Pick a coffee shop near you and text me the address. Diana should be there. She has questions and, not this time, son, I said. And I kept every edge out of my voice, kept it just a father talking to his boy. I need to talk to you. Just you. Can you do that for me? A long pause. I could hear Diana saying something in the background, muffled, insistent. Then Michael said quietly enough that I don't think Diana heard, Okay, Dad. Sunday, 2 o'clock. Just me. Thank you, I said. I ended the call. Stood on the park path for a moment, with the phone in my hand, looking at the fountain. The water caught the morning light and threw it in every direction, small, bright pieces of it scattering across the pavement. My phone buzzed again. Webb this time. Mr. Callahan, he said. I wanted to let you know that Diana's attorney contacted our legal department this morning, less than 2 hours after the notification letters went out. She called me too, I said. I expected as much. A brief pause. There's something else. Something Eleanor left with me that I haven't shown you yet. She asked me to hold it until after the notification went out and the family had time to react. Another pause. I'd like you to come in before you meet with Michael on Sunday. There's one more thing you need to see. My hand tightened on the phone. One more thing. With Eleanor, one more thing always meant the thing that changed everything. I'll be there Saturday morning, I said. I'll be here, Webb said. And Mr. Callahan, you handled that call well. Eleanor always said you were better at staying calm under pressure than you gave yourself credit for. I looked out at the fountain, at the light breaking apart on the water. She was usually right about things like that, I said. She was usually right about most things, Webb said. See you Saturday. Webb's private office on the second floor of First Heritage Bank felt different on a Saturday morning, quieter. The building was half-staffed, the hallways empty, the carpet muffling every sound until the whole floor felt padded and private. Webb was already at his desk when Patricia brought me up, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, reading glasses on a yellow legal pad in front of him, covered in handwriting. He looked like a man who came in on Saturdays because he wanted to, not because anyone made him. He stood when I walked in. Mr. Callahan, thank you for coming. You said Eleanor left something else, I said, pulling out the chair across from him. I didn't sleep much last night thinking about what it might be. Webb almost smiled. That sounds like what she intended. He sat back down and folded his hands on the desk. Before I give it to you, I want to tell you something about your wife that I don't think you know. I straightened in my chair. All right. Eleanor came to me the first time in 2008. Webb began, but she didn't come to me as a novice. She came in with 40 years of financial self-education already behind her. He paused. Did you know she studied economics at UNC Charlotte before you were married? I blinked. She studied education. She was a teacher. She was a teacher, Webb agreed. But before she switched majors in her third year, she spent 2 years in the economics program. She left because of family circumstances. Her father's illness, I believe, but she never stopped learning. He leaned forward slightly. Mr. Callahan, the woman I worked with for 15 years, had a more sophisticated understanding of portfolio theory than most licensed brokers I've met. She read the Wall Street Journal every morning for 4 decades. She tracked her positions in a handwritten ledger going back to 1985. Every trade, every dividend, every reinvestment, all of it recorded by hand. My throat tightened. I thought about Eleanor at the kitchen table with her reading glasses and her yellow legal pad every morning. I had assumed she was working on crossword puzzles. I thought she was doing the crossword, I said, and my voice came out raw and slightly ridiculous. Webb's expression softened completely. She was building your future, he said quietly. Every single morning. I pressed the back of my hand hard against my mouth and held it there for a moment. My eyes were burning fiercely. Why didn't she tell me? I asked. Any of it. The economics classes, the investing, the ledger. Why did she keep all of it from me for 45 years? Webb was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. She told me once, he said, that she kept it private for 2 reasons. The first was that she was afraid of failure. If the investments went badly, she didn't want you to carry the weight of that loss. She wanted the risk to be hers alone. He met my eyes. The second reason she gave me was this. She said, Bob trusts me completely. If I tell him, he'll start asking questions because that's what he does when he loves something. And if he starts asking questions, it stops being a gift. The burning behind my eyes became impossible to hold back. One tear went, then another, and I stopped fighting it. She wanted it to be a gift. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She wanted it to be the gift, Webb said. The one she spent 45 years building for you. He opened his desk drawer and brought out an envelope. Cream-colored like the one from the vault, but smaller. No wax seal this time. Just my name on the front in Eleanor's handwriting, and a single instruction beneath it underlined twice, only after. Only after what? I asked. After the notification went out, Webb said. After Diana reacted. After you'd seen what you were dealing with. He placed it on the desk between us, hands flat on either side of it, deliberate and ceremonial. She brought this to me 3 months before she passed. She said, Douglas, this is the last thing Bob will need from you. Make sure he has it before he talks to Michael. My hand moved towards the envelope. Then I stopped. I'm not going to open it here, I said. Webb nodded slowly like he had expected exactly that. She said you wouldn't, he said. She said you'd take it home and sit with it first. She knew me too well, I said. She knew you perfectly, Webb said. There's a difference. I picked up the envelope and put it in my breast pocket, next to Eleanor's first letter, next to the index card. My pocket was getting heavy with her. I didn't mind at all. I stood to leave. At the door, I turned back. Webb, I said, thank you. For everything you did for her. For keeping all of this safe. He looked at me steadily over the top of his reading glasses. It was the best work I've ever done, he said. And I mean that. I believed him completely. Michael was already at the table when I walked into the coffee shop on Providence Road. He had chosen a corner booth near the back, away from the windows, away from the door, the seat of a man who wasn't sure he wanted to be seen. He was in a flannel shirt and jeans, no tie, no blazer, nothing that belonged to the polished version of himself he usually performed in Diana's presence. He looked like my son. He looked like the boy who used to sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I fixed things around the house, asking me questions I didn't always know the answer to. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He stood when he saw me knocking his knee against the table edge, coffee sloshing in his mug. "Dad?" His voice cracked on the single syllable like something inside him had been pulled too tight for too long. "Sit down, son," I said. "You're going to knock something over." He sat. I sat across from him. A young waitress appeared and I ordered coffee black and she disappeared without fuss. Michael wrapped both hands around his mug and looked at me with eyes so red-rimmed and exhausted that my chest ached just to see them. "Dad, I don't even know where to start." "Then I'll start," I said, "and you just listen until you're ready to talk. Can you do that?" He nodded, jaw tight, knuckles white around the mug. I told him. All of it. The vault, the folder marked D, the LLC, the emails with Philip Garrett. I kept my voice even and steady, the way you brief someone on a job site before something complicated, just the facts in order without drama. I watched Michael's face as I talked, watched the color drain from it at the LLC, watched his jaw clench at the Garrett emails, watched his eyes fill and spill over when I told him about the video from 2021. When I finished, the coffee shop hummed quietly around us. A child at the counter was asking for a chocolate muffin. Someone's phone played a few notes of a song before being silenced. Michael stared at this table. Then he looked up at me, eyes wet and burning, and said the last thing I expected him to say. "Dad, I already knew." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. "Not the specifics," he said quickly, voice breaking. "Not the LLC, not the lawyer, but I knew something was wrong. I've known for years." He pressed his fingers hard against his eyes, shoulders shaking. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. I told myself Diana was just ambitious, just protective. I didn't want to. I couldn't. He stopped. Drew a long, ragged breath. "I chose not to look, Dad. That's the truth of it. I chose not to look because looking meant I had to do something about it." My heart broke for him in a way that was completely separate from anything Diana had done to me. "Michael," I said. "I didn't defend you," he said, and now the tears were running freely down his face right there in the coffee shop, and he didn't try to hide them. "At Hawkins's office, when Diana said those things to you, I sat there, and I looked at the table, and I let her say all of it, and I didn't say a word. I have been sick about it every single day since." "Son," I said, and I leaned forward. "Look at me." He looked up. "Your mother wrote about you," I said. "Pages of it. You want to see?" His breath caught. "She wrote about me." I pulled out my phone, opened the photo album, where I had photographed Eleanor's letters from the vault. Found the pages about Michael. Turned the phone and set it on the table facing him. He picked it up with shaking hands. His lips moved slightly as he read. Then they stopped moving. His face crumpled completely, the way a face does when it gives up trying to hold everything in at once. He pressed one fist against his mouth and sobbed once hard from deep in his chest. "She says I got your stubbornness," he managed, voice wrecked and wet. "She always blamed me for that," I said, and my own voice was none too steady. "She says..." He had to stop. Breathe. Try again. "She says she loves me exactly as I am, even the parts that drive her absolutely crazy." Another broken sound escaped him. "She says the part that drives her craziest is how much I'm like you." I reached across the table and gripped my son's arm. He grabbed my hand back so hard it hurt, and I let it hurt because some things are supposed to. We stayed like that for a long moment, father and son, 45 years and 41 years of separate lives, suddenly occupying the same small corner of a coffee shop on Providence Road, held together by a woman who had loved us both enough to plan for exactly this moment. Then Michael's eyes moved to something over my shoulder. His grip on my hand tightened. "Dad," he said, and his voice changed. "Diana's outside." I turned slightly, just enough to see through the window. Diana stood on the sidewalk in a gray coat, perfectly still, looking directly at our table. Her expression was unreadable from this distance, but her eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that told me everything I needed to know. She had followed Michael here, and now she was deciding whether to come inside. She came inside. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed once. Diana didn't walk in the way she had walked into Hawkins's conference room 3 weeks ago, that cold, prepared entry of a woman who had rehearsed every word in advance. This time there was something different underneath the composure. A tightness around her jaw. A fraction too much control in her shoulders. Her gray coat was buttoned to the throat. Her heels clicked against the tile floor, but the rhythm was slightly too fast. She found our booth in under 3 seconds and crossed the room without hesitation. Michael's hand tightened on mine so hard the bones pressed together. "Diana." His voice came out low and warning, a tone I had never once heard him use with her before. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on me with the particular brightness of someone running on adrenaline and outrage. She stopped at the edge of the booth, gripped the back of the empty chair beside me, and leaned forward slightly. "I need to say something," she said. "And I need you to actually listen this time." "Sit down, Diana," Michael said. "Please don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene," she said, but her voice had a tremor in it that hadn't been there in Hawkins's office 2 weeks ago. That tremor told me everything. Diana was not angry. Diana was afraid. "I just want to talk. Calmly. Like adults." "Then sit," I said. She sat rigidly on the edge of the chair. Her hands went flat on the table in front of her. Fingers spread, the posture of someone making a conscious effort to appear controlled. "Bob," she said, and the use of my first name was deliberate, a small performance of familiarity. "I want you to understand something. I don't have a problem with you. I never did. What happened at Hawkins's office, I was emotional. The whole situation was I said things I shouldn't have said." I watched her face. She was good. If I hadn't seen that video, if I hadn't read Eleanor's green folder cover to cover, I might have believed the softness she was projecting right now. It was impressive, actually, the way she could assemble the appearance of vulnerability on short notice. "Diana," I said, "do you remember March 14th, 2021? The softness flickered, just for a fraction of a second. But I caught it the way you catch a fault in a circuit before anyone else hears the pop." "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. "You were on the phone in the living room of Michael's old apartment," I said, keeping my voice completely level. "You were talking to someone about what would happen after Eleanor died, about getting me out of the house." I paused. Eleanor had a camera running. The color left Diana's face so fast, it was like watching a light switch off. Michael turned sharply to look at her. "Diana, that's..." She stopped. Started again. That conversation was taken completely out of context. "You said I had nothing." I said, still calm, still level. "You said you'd have me out of the house before I figured out what hit me. You said Michael would never fight you on it." I folded my hands on the table. "Those were your exact words. I've watched it more than once." Michael's chair scraped back from the table. He stood up, and the motion was so sudden that the waitress at the counter looked over in alarm. His face had gone through shock and disbelief and arrived somewhere harder and quieter. His jaw was set. His eyes were dry now, all the tears burned away, replaced by something that looked very much like his mother's expression when she had finally made a decision she'd been putting off too long. "Michael, sit down," Diana said quickly, reaching for his arm. "We can talk about this at home. This isn't the..." "Don't." He stepped back out of reach, and the single word landed in the booth like a stone dropped in still water. "Don't tell me what this isn't." He looked at her the way you look at something you've been carrying for a very long time and have finally decided to set down. Were you planning this before we got married? Diana's mouth opened. Closed. The LLC, Michael said. Renfield Consulting. Was it open before the wedding? Her jaw tightened. That was the answer. I need you to go home, Michael said. His voice was absolutely steady, steadier than I had ever heard it, and it sounded so much like Eleanor in that moment that my throat constricted painfully. I'll be home tonight. We'll talk tonight. But right now, Diana, I need you to leave. Diana looked at her husband for a long moment. Something moved across her face that might, in a different version of this story, have been genuine hurt. Then she picked up her purse from the table, buttoned the top button of her coat that had come undone, and walked back across the coffee shop floor, the way she had come in. The bell above the door chimed again. She was gone. The coffee shop exhaled around us. The waitress at the counter went back to wiping down the espresso machine. The child with the chocolate muffin was still working on it steadily, completely unbothered. Michael lowered himself back into his seat. His hands were shaking visibly on the table, trembling in a way he couldn't control, the kind of trembling that comes from the body catching up to what the mind has just decided. He pressed both palms flat on the wood to stop them. "Dad," he said. And then he couldn't finish the sentence. His eyes filled again, and he tipped his head back and blinked hard, refusing to let it spill over, fighting it the way I had fought it in a parking garage 2 weeks ago. "Take your time," I said. He lowered his head. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice cracked all the way through. "For the table, Dad. I'm so sorry for looking at the table." My chest split open. "I know, son," I said. "I know." The waitress came by and refilled both our mugs without being asked. She was young, maybe 22, with paint-stained fingers, and the particular discretion of someone who had worked a customer-facing job long enough to know when a table needed to be left alone. I was grateful for her. I was grateful for the coffee. I was grateful for the ordinary continuing sounds of the world around us, while Michael and I sat with something that was neither ordinary nor continuing, but had been a long time arriving. Michael wrapped both hands around his mug. The trembling had mostly stopped. "Tell me everything," he said. "All of it. Whatever Mom found, whatever's in those folders. I want to know." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Some of it is hard." He looked up at me with his mother's eyes, the same steady gray, the same quality of attention that Eleanor had when she was listening to something that mattered. "Dad," he said, "I've been not sure for 12 years. I'm done with not sure." So I told him. I went through it methodically, the way I used to walk apprentices through a complex wiring job. Start at the beginning, explain each connection. Don't skip anything, because the part that seems small is usually the part that matters. The LLC opened in 2016, a year before the wedding. The regular transfers into Diana's private account. The emails with Philip Garrett in 2021, planning how to minimize my share of Eleanor's estate. Michael listened without interrupting. But his face told me everything his voice didn't. His jaw tightened at the LLC. His eyes went glassy with something beyond tears. At the Garrett emails, a hollow, gutted expression, the look of a man watching the architecture of 12 years rearrange itself around a truth he had been circling without ever landing on. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring at his coffee. Then he said in a voice stripped down to its studs, "She married me for the money, for the—" "We don't know that for certain," I said carefully. He shook his head. "I know it, Dad. I've known something was wrong for a long time. I just kept—" He stopped, pressed his fist against his mouth, then lowered it. "I kept telling myself that loving someone means giving them the benefit of the doubt. But there's a point where benefit of the doubt becomes something else, something less generous." He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed and raw. "Mom saw it before I did." "Your mother saw most things before most people," I said. She wrote about me, he said. In the vault. You said she wrote about me. She wrote about you more than anyone else, I said. I opened my phone and pulled up the photographs again, finding the pages I hadn't shown him yet. The longer ones. The ones where Eleanor had written about Michael as a child, as a teenager, as the young man who had made choices she hadn't agreed with, but had loved through anyway. I slid the phone across the table. He read slowly. His lips moved on certain words. Halfway down the second page, he made a sound, low in his throat. The sound of a man whose last defense has quietly given out, and pressed his hand over his eyes, shoulders pulling inward. She says she's proud of me, he said, voice wrecked and barely there. Even after everything, she says she's proud. She is, I said. She was, both. He lowered his hand. His face was a landscape of grief and exhaustion, and something beginning to look tentatively and painfully like relief. What do I do now, Dad, with Diana? With all of it? What do I actually do? I looked at my son across the table and thought about Eleanor's index card. Don't let them rush you. Don't let them guilt you. I thought about what she would say to Michael if she were sitting in this booth instead of me. You don't have to decide anything tonight, I said. You don't have to decide anything this week. What you need to do right now is be honest with yourself about what you already know. I leaned forward slightly. But Michael, there's something happening on Monday. Something I need you to be there for. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. What's happening Monday? There's a meeting at Hawkins's office, I said. Webb Hawkins, Diana, her attorney. They're going to try one last time to contest the trust. I held his gaze steadily. And your mother left one final letter. Something she gave to Webb 3 months before she died, to be read when this moment came. I paused. I haven't opened it yet. I've been carrying it since Saturday. Michael stared at me. You've had it since Saturday, and you didn't open it. Eleanor said only when I needed it most, I said. I think Monday morning in that room with everyone present is when I need it most. Something shifted in Michael's face. The exhaustion was still there. The grief was still there. But underneath both of those things, something else was surfacing, the slow, deliberate straightening of a man who has finally decided which direction he is facing. I'll be there, he said. Monday. I'll be there. I reached across the table and gripped his forearm the way I had when he was small and needed to know that I was not going anywhere. He grabbed my wrist back hard the way he had in the booth when Diana walked in and held on. Dad, he said, I'm sorry it took me this long. You're here now, I said. That's what counts. Outside the window of the coffee shop, Providence Road moved through its ordinary Sunday afternoon. Cars, joggers, a couple walking a dog. The world doing what it always did, indifferent and beautiful, carrying on. Inside, my son held on to my arm like he was afraid I might disappear, and I held on to his like I was making a promise. Neither of us let go first. The conference room on the 12th floor of Meridian Tower looked exactly the same as it had 3 weeks ago. Same leather chairs, same glass table, same pale October light coming through the windows above the Charlotte skyline. But the people sitting in those chairs were different. Not in appearance, in weight. I came in with James on my left and Michael on my right. Michael had a button-down shirt, and his jaw set in a way I recognized from Eleanor's face when she had made up her mind about something and would not be moved. James wore his good flannel jacket and sat down like a man who had every right to be in any room he chose to enter. Webb was already there at the end of the table, his files stacked in front of him, with the orderly patience of someone who had done this before and was not worried about the outcome. Diana came in 2 minutes later, with a man I hadn't met, young wire-rimmed glasses, the practiced confidence of a junior attorney who had won enough cases to be dangerous, but not enough to be wise. He introduced himself as Ryan Caldwell, Diana's legal counsel. He opened his briefcase and spread papers across his side of the table, with the efficiency of someone who intended this to be quick. Hawkins called the room to order. "This meeting has been convened," he said, "to address the formal objection filed by Mrs. Diana Callahan regarding the Eleanor Margaret Callahan Revocable Living Trust, established 2015. He looked over his glasses at Caldwell. "Counselor, you may present your grounds." Caldwell straightened. "We're contesting on 2 grounds," he said. "First, mental incapacity. We believe Mrs. Callahan's judgment was compromised in the final years of her life due to illness. Second, undue influence. We believe Robert Callahan used his position as spouse to pressure Mrs. Callahan into excluding the broader family." I felt Michael stiffen beside me. His hand went flat on the table, fingers pressing down hard. Webb didn't even blink. He opened the top folder in his stack and slid a document across the table with the calm of a man playing a card he had been holding for years. Mrs. Callahan's physician, Dr. Sandra Reeves, completed a formal cognitive assessment at every annual trust review from 2015 through 2024, Webb said. "All 9 assessments are documented here. All 9 returned a finding of full legal and mental capacity. The most recent assessment was completed 7 months before her death." He slid another document. "The trust was drafted and reviewed annually by Catherine Simmons, a licensed estate planning attorney in good standing with the North Carolina State Bar. Her certification of proper execution is included." He slid a third document. "As for undue influence, the trust was structured specifically to operate independently of Robert Callahan. He was not a co-trustee, not a co-grantor, and was not present at any of the annual review meetings. Mrs. Callahan conducted all trust business independently and without Mr. Callahan's knowledge." Webb folded his hands. "There are no valid grounds here. Mr. Caldwell." Caldwell's jaw tightened. He looked at the documents. Looked at Diana. Diana's face had gone very still. Hawkins cleared his throat. "Is there anything further from the objecting party?" Caldwell gathered his papers slowly, the way a man does when he is rearranging his dignity. "We'll need time to review these documents and we've been through them already," Webb said. "All of them." Eleanor anticipated every line of this challenge. She had 10 years to prepare. The room went quiet in a way that felt final. I reached into my breast pocket and took out the cream envelope. The last one. The one I had been carrying since Saturday, without opening through Sunday afternoon, with Michael through Sunday night, when I had held it in both hands and felt Eleanor's presence in the weight of it, and still could not bring myself to break the seal. "There's one more thing," I said. Every head in the room turned toward me. I broke the seal. My hands were steady. I had been a lot of things in my life, afraid, uncertain, beaten down, and built back up, but my hands had always been steady. 45 years of electrical work had given me that at least. The letter was 4 pages. Eleanor's handwriting careful and right-leaning, covering every line. I read it aloud. "To my family. If you are hearing this letter, it means you are sitting in a room trying to take something from the man who spent his entire life making sure that none of you ever went without." I paused, kept going. "I want to be clear about something. The trust I established is not a punishment. It is not a rebuke. It is a simple recognition of a simple truth. The money in that trust came from Bob's hands. From 45 years of him showing up every single day in other people's houses, fixing what was broken, making things work. He handed me his paycheck every Friday for 4 decades and never once asked what I did with it. That trust is what I did with it." Michael made a sound beside me, ragged and quiet. His eyes were overflowing. I kept reading, to Diana. "I don't write this with anger. I write it with sorrow because I believe you are capable of more than what you have chosen. The man you called a foolish old electrician spent his life making sure the lights stayed on in our home, in our neighborhood, in buildings all across this city. He never asked for recognition. He never asked for credit. He simply showed up. That is a kind of strength that no degree and no bank account can manufacture. I had to stop. Breathe. The trust is legally unbreakable. I made sure of that. Not out of spite, out of love for my husband, who deserved to be protected by someone since he spent his whole life protecting everyone else. Diana's face had crumpled, not in the calculated way she had performed vulnerability at the coffee shop. Something real had gotten through. Her eyes were wet, and she wasn't fighting it, and for one moment I saw the person underneath all the architecture she had built around herself. I turned to the final page, to Bob. My love, by the time you read this out loud, and I know you will read it out loud, because you have never been a man who kept important things to himself. I hope you understand why I did everything the way I did. I hope the weight of the last few weeks has not broken you, because you are not a man who breaks. You are a man who holds. You held our family together for 45 years with your bare hands. Now let someone else do the holding for a while. The money is yours. The house by the water is yours. The life I planned for us, take it, Bob. Take all of it. You have more than earned every single day of it. All my love always and without reservation. Eleanor. The room was completely still. Michael was crying openly, his shoulders shaking, one hand pressed over his mouth. James had his head down, jaw tight, blinking hard at the table. Webb was looking out the window with the expression of a man keeping himself carefully together. Diana's attorney closed his briefcase slowly. He looked at Diana for a long moment. Mrs. Callahan, Caldwell said quietly. Based on the documentation Mr. Webb has presented, the physician attestations, the annual certifications, the independent legal counsel, I cannot advise you to proceed with this challenge. The grounds are not there. He gathered his papers. I'm recommending withdrawal. Hawkins removed his glasses, cleaned them with his pocket square, and replaced them. Then the matter is resolved, he said. The trust will proceed to distribution. I folded Eleanor's letter and put it back in my breast pocket. I pressed my hand flat against my chest over all of it. 4 pages of her. An index card. A 4-page letter from a week ago. All of Eleanor that I could carry. It was enough. It was more than enough. The house at Lake Norman sat on a gentle slope above the waterline with a wide back porch, a dock that needed honest work, and a stand of white oaks running along the eastern property line that Eleanor would have looked at once and said, yes, that's exactly right. I knew it the moment I saw those trees. I knew it the way you know something when it stops being a decision and starts being a recognition. I bought it in November, 3 weeks after the meeting at Hawkins's office. Not because I needed the space, 3 bedrooms. Nothing grand. Nothing that would make anyone turn their head on the street, but because Eleanor had written something once in one of her private notes from the vault, a sentence I had first read in the dim light of the parking garage at First Heritage Bank, standing next to my truck with my hands shaking and my eyes burning. I have always wanted to fall asleep to the sound of water. I had carried that sentence through every single day that followed. Through the confrontations and the lawyers and the long sleepless nights on the beige sofa in the Midtown apartment. Through Douglas Webb's phone calls and Gerald Hawkins's steady, careful voice reading Eleanor's final letter aloud, while Diana sat across the room and the whole world rearranged itself. Buying this house was the first promise I made to Eleanor after she was gone. I intended to keep it. The other promises I kept quietly, the way I had always done most things, without announcement. Without audience. The first morning I woke up at Lake Norman, I carried my coffee out to the back porch before 6 and sat down in the cold and watched the sun come up across the water. It moved slowly at first, a gray light bleeding into the sky above the eastern tree line, And then all at once it broke through and laid itself gold and wide across the surface of the lake, and I felt something loosen in my chest that had been wound tight for months. I sat there and thought about the electrician Diana had called foolish. I thought about him for a long time. I thought about every house he had ever wired, every wall he had opened up and made safe and closed back again. Every Saturday morning, driving to a job site before the neighborhood was awake. Every Friday evening, walking through the back door and setting his paycheck on the counter with both hands. I thought about 45 years of that man showing up doing the work, never once asking for applause. That man had built something extraordinary. He just hadn't known what it was while he was building it. James came on the second Saturday of November, driving up from Charlotte in the old Bronco, with Martha's apple pie riding in the passenger seat, and Roosevelt's orange fur covering his jacket from collar to cuff. He climbed out, looked around at the property, the slope, the dock, the long line of oaks, the water lying flat and silver in the morning light, and walked the perimeter with his hands in his pockets and the expression of a man conducting a slow and entirely honest appraisal. "Eleanor picked well," he said at last, stopping at the edge of the dock. "She always did," I said. We went up to the porch and sat down with slices of Martha's pie and coffee that I had finally, after 67 years of trying, learned to make the right way. The lake spread out wide and still in front of us, and for a while neither of us felt the need to fill the air with anything more than that. "How's Michael doing?" James asked eventually. "He calls every Sunday morning," I said. 9 o'clock, same as you used to. He's staying with his father-in-law in Greensboro while he and Diana work through things. He didn't say much more than that, and I didn't press him. I watched a heron move low and slow across the far edge of the water. He'll find his way. He's got more of Eleanor in him than he realizes. And Diana, I turned that over for a moment before I answered. I thought about the look that had crossed Diana's face in Hawkins's office, not the composed, controlled expression she had carried in through the door, but the one that broke through underneath it, raw and brief, just before she pulled herself together and walked out without a word to anyone. "I think Diana is exactly who she is," I said carefully. "And I think she's going to have to look at that very honestly and decide whether it's enough for her. That is not something I can fix, and it's not something I'm going to try to fix." I took a sip of my coffee. "That chapter is hers to write." James gave a short nod, the kind that meant he had asked what he needed to ask and heard what he needed to hear. "So what does Bob Callahan do now?" he said. "Seriously, what does a man with $72 million do with a Tuesday?" I laughed. It came up from somewhere real, and that still surprised me a little how laughter had started finding its way back in. "I fixed the dock last week," I said. 6 new planks re-anchored every cleat, reset the post on the south end that was listing. Took me 2 full days, and I slept better those 2 nights than I had in months. I looked out at the water. "I've also been talking to the volunteer fire department 2 towns over. Their electrical systems are 30 years out of code. I offered to handle the whole update. No charge." James stared at me with something between disbelief and pure, uncomplicated affection. "You're volunteering as an electrician. $72 million doesn't change what I know how to do," I said, "or what I love doing." He shook his head slowly, grinning wide. "She knew," he said. "Eleanor knew you'd do exactly this." "She always knew," I said. When James pulled out of the driveway in the late afternoon, I walked down the slope to the dock and stood at the far end of it, hands deep in my jacket pockets, watching the light go. It left fast in November, dropping behind the western tree line in long orange and copper streaks that stretched flat across the water, like something laid down with great intention and great care. Eleanor would have loved this hour. She would have carried a blanket down to the Adirondack chair at the end of the dock and read until the light gave out completely, and then she would have looked up from her book and said something about the color of the sky that made me see it entirely differently than I had been seeing it 1 second before. She had that gift, making the world sharper just by pointing at it. She had been doing it for 45 years. Apparently, she intended to keep going. I pulled her letter from my breast pocket, the final one, the 4 pages read aloud in Hawkins's office, and unfolded it in the failing light. I knew every word. I could have closed my eyes and spoken every line from memory. But I held it open anyway, just to feel the paper she had touched with her own hands. I did what you said. I told her quietly, speaking to the water and the darkening sky the way a man speaks when he is certain he is being heard. I took it, all of it. The house, the water, the life you built for us. My throat pulled tight the way it always did when I talked to her, that deep, specific ache that I had long since stopped trying to ease because it was the exact shape of her absence, and I had chosen to keep it close. You would love it here, Elle. The water sounds exactly right at night. Below the dock, the lake moved gently, taking the last gold off the surface. I folded the letter, put it carefully away. Above the tree line to the west, the first star of the evening came out small, certain, burning quietly at an impossible distance. I stood there until the cold had worked all the way through my jacket. Then I turned and walked back up the slope toward the house, where the kitchen light was burning warm in the window and the coffee was still on. I went inside. Life has a way of revealing the truth when we least expect it. Looking back, I realized the greatest gift I received was not money or property. It was clarity. I finally understood that respect cannot be demanded and love cannot survive where greed takes root. That lesson will stay with me for the rest of my life. Many people watch a revenge dad story hoping for payback, but I believe the real victory is walking away with your dignity untouched. Real family justice is not about anger. It is about choosing honesty over fear, wisdom over pride, and peace over bitterness. That is the kind of family justice worth fighting for. If my journey teaches you anything, let it be this: never ignore the small warning signs. Ask difficult questions. Protect what you've earned. Tell the people you love how much they matter while you still can. The strongest revenge. Dad stories are not built on revenge alone. They are built on courage, forgiveness, and the strength to keep moving forward when life hurts the most. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment and tell me what you would have done in my place. If this story spoke to you, consider subscribing for more stories about family justice and revenge dad. Your support allows this community to grow and reminds me that none of us walks through hardship alone. Before you go, one final note. Some scenes in this story include fictional elements created for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to actual people, places, or events is purely coincidental, but the lessons about respect, resilience, and family justice are meant to stay with you long after the story ends.